Unit 13 Applications. This is Martha Olson. We know worldwide there's about 925 million people that do not have enough food to eat. We know hunger is a different term than appetite. Hunger is that internal physiological drive to find and consume food, whereas appetite is you feel hungry. When we look at hunger as a global problem, there's about 20% of the people in the developing world that suffer from chronic hunger, not just a week-long, hunger problem, but chronic hunger. In looking at food insecurity, it's limited or uncertain availability of nutritious food and that inability to acquire food that we have, which is very different from food security. Looking at households, food secure households, that's about 85.1%. State to state differences are noted also. When we look at malnutrition, that is that failure to achieve nutrient requirements. It can impair the physical growth. It can impair physical as far as like tissue healing and wound healing. And also mental health goes along with that from that shortage of food. Infections such as AIDS are predominantly noted with rapid population growth and other environmental and social factors that threaten to reverse many of the things that we've tried to do to eradicate hunger and malnutrition. The most critical nutrition deficiencies in the developing world today are protein, vitamin A, and iron. And through supplementation and fortification, we have tried to effectively tackle those, and that's been fairly successful with the exception of the iron deficiency. That one has been much harder to try to correct. The Child and Adult Care Food Program in the United States has different services for both children and the older adult population, trying to promote good, healthy nutrition. The World Health Organization is the big one that looks at global help for people that are starving or having problems with nutrition. And then the largest United Nations agency is a Food and Agriculture Organization that tries to promote agriculture, growing their own. Kind of what can we do to help them to grow food so that they can be self-sustaining instead of just continuing to feed and send food from the United States. What can we do to help them to improve either their land, the amount of water, getting agriculture so that it can be self-sufficient. Looking at the face of American malnutrition, we know that it is here in the United States. It's with the working poor, people that work in jobs that barely make enough for them to be able to buy adequate groceries and pay rent. Many of our older adults, for a variety of reasons, some of it is, lack of access to being able to get to the store and get groceries, or they're very poor. Their spouse has died and their income is very minimal, and so they cannot afford that. Or some of them, it is a lack of being able to cognitively be able to cook and take care of themselves. The homeless, and then many of the children in the United States, and that's why the programs offer both breakfast and dinner, because 2/3 of the nutrient requirements for children should be able to be met at the school system, helping to promote them in coming to school and also being successful in school. At risk, as our population ages, there are more and more elderly. And when we look at that part of society, we know that there's a lot of older people that will not ask for help or do not have the ability to know the services that are out there to help them. There are many programs in America that help with hunger and helping with that. The newest one is the SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And in looking at worldwide hunger, we know that from 1989 to 1997, the food banks in Canada doubled. So it's not just a problem here in the United States. Food insecurity and hunger were highest in the inner cities in the United States. And then looking at the map, we can see that the red areas, most of them are in Africa and throughout the Middle East. As far as Europe, Spain has had about 52% unemployment in Spain, and that has been a contributing factor to some of their malnutrition that they are experiencing in that European country. Some of the problems causing hunger are population growth, where the population is growing faster than they can sustain. And that is prevalent in Africa and many of those countries where they maybe don't have access to birth control or it's part of their culture. Environmental degradation and deterioration, where we are looking at, the over farming. They are getting as much off of the land as they can, but they're not able to put the nutrients back into the land. So many factors go into that when they have limited resources available. Malnutrition and hunger in the developing world have declined in the last 3 decades, but there still are 790 million people that don't have enough to eat, and that is very concerning. Again, some of the factors that we see with that: poverty, the population is growing, and then people are living in the cities where they are not able to self support. Infection makes people more vulnerable. It's that downward spiral the textbook talks about. That fever that goes with an infection speeds the depletion of calories and nutrients, making it often hard for them to overcome that infection and disease. And then we keep reading about the infectious diarrhea from contaminated water. And babies that are breastfed have a better survival rate because they are not drinking contaminated water or having formula mixed from contaminated water that causes a lot of the dysentery or diarrhea. Political, we can see that when people are busy fighting a war, the country uses the resource to, fight and not feed the people. Our refugees, logistically, it's very difficult even for countries to get in there and help the refugees in time and efficiently so that they can survive. And then as sanctions are imposed upon many of these countries that are in political or civil war, the shortages created by embargoes oftentimes hurt the people that are most powerless and most needy rather than the government officials. In looking at, droughts, mudslides, and hurricanes, the government agencies that are available in the United States to help with that are listed here. The CDC works with infections and other problems that they have. Agriculture and environment, looking at that tricky balance. We know advances in agriculture have increased food supply in the developing world, but we're still again seeing the clear cutting, over irrigation, soil erosion as countries are clear cutting, taking out forests, and changing the environment and the soil pH. Factors that allow hunger to continue in the world are listed here. AIDS has become one that we've noted a lot in the news, and they've done a lot to try to eradicate and continue to help decrease the spread of AIDS. Wars and population growth continue on as well. Protein energy malnutrition, often referred to as PEM, is kwashiorkor marcimus from not having enough to eat. Infants and children are very likely to suffer from that because they are growing. They have a huge need for protein for growth, and also they're the most vulnerable. In looking at our lethal forms of malnutrition, protein energy malnutrition is the most lethal form of malnutrition. As I said, the children are the most vulnerable. Specific deficiencies: iodine deficiency is one that can cause brain damage that's permanent, impaired psychomotor development. And we don't have iodine deficiency here in the United States because most of our food supply is with iodized salt. And so our leading cause of preventable brain damage is that iodine deficiency. This is a picture of a child that has creatism or iodine deficiency. Vitamin A deficiency is also concerning. It causes preventable childhood blindness. As I said earlier, it's been one of the deficiencies we've been able to get a little better control of. One of the countries that tends to have a lot of vitamin A deficiency is India, and they have combated that with some of the enhanced and enriched foods that they're feeding. Our best sources of vitamin A tend to be expensive and inaccessible. In the developing world, our beta carotene has a lot of vitamin A, and those would be foods such as, your carrots, your pumpkins, squash, the orange, deep orange vegetables tend to be very good in vitamin A. And the food crop that about half of the world eats is rice, which we know is very limited with many of your beta carotene. It's a starchy food, but it doesn't have a lot of nutritional value to it. And looking at iron deficiency anemia, as I said earlier, this has been the one that has been much harder to take care of because we see protein and iron comes from protein-rich foods, your meats, and those developing countries don't have access to a lot of, of the protein or iron-rich foods that would help combat that. We have a high percentage of iron deficiency in women that are pregnant, young children, and your female population tends to have more iron deficiency anemia. So our most common nutritional deficiency is iron deficiency, and some of the other deficiencies we've talked about are proteins, calories, iodine, vitamin A, and iron. In the United States, food insecurity and hunger are highest in the inner city within our Hispanic and African American populations, and in households with very young children, and single households headed by women. In the United States, this demographic has changed since they updated the new textbook to the 5th edition. Iowa has now been labeled as food insecurity below national average. In the previous textbook, it was in the next color up with near national average. So we are seeing many of these states looking at food insecurity, most of them California, Texas, with very large populations to support. And as we look at obesity, which sounds kind of funny to end our PowerPoint with this topic, but we know that you can have people that are obese but not healthy. They're eating cheap, high-calorie foods like ramen noodles, your starchy foods that are fillers. And families are trying to maximize caloric intake and not buying the fruits and vegetables that would help provide some healthy nutrition for their family because it's, not within the budgetary means. So as we look to the future, we know that there are many topics and areas that need to be further explored, and what we can do to help prevent hunger and malnutrition in the world is an ongoing consideration. This ends our chapter. Thank you.